Good morning, and thank you for joining this webinar from TENS, the Episcopal Network for Stewardship. We're gathered today to talk about finding your stewardship love language. Many of you might be familiar with the 5 languages of love as a tool. We're going to be taking that and moving it into how we look at models for recognition and motivations for giving in the church, and see what we can glean from that. I am joined today by my gracious and capacious colleagues on the TENS board, the Reverend Amy Underhill Lithgow, who's the rector of St. Luke's Denver in the Diocese of Colorado, and the Reverend Canadina Van Claveren, Canon for Development in the Diocese of Maryland. Experts and wonderful people in their own right. Hope you get to know them and lean on them for their great teaching and expertise as TENS practitioners as well. Many of you may be familiar with the 5 love languages. It's been on the New York Times bestsellers list for quite a while. 20 million copies have been sold. Gary Chapman wrote this first as sort of a self-help guide to help couples in relationship figure out how they communicate. But it's since been moved into other contexts and other metaphors. We're going to not spend a whole lot of time on the particular philosophy or pop psychology of the 5 love languages, but we are going to take the metaphor and we're going to use it to talk about ways that we feel good about being recognized, how we are motivated to give and share our gifts in church, and see if we can glean some knowledge about our own selves and how we might help others along their journey of gratitude and abundance. If you want to learn more about the 5 languages of love, there are many places to go, including their website and other folks. So we want to share that with you and let you know where this information at least comes from. What we're going to talk about today, our learning objectives, is let's get familiar with what a love language is and why it matters. Dina is going to lead us through a few of our well-known gospel contexts, and we're going to see what love languages Jesus is using, or the people around Jesus. What are they hearing when they hear some of these messages in some well-known stories? So we're going to have a little practical exercise. And then we're going to move into how we talk about love languages as a lens for stewardship, how you can use it to create your campaigns, and how you can recognize your donors, and then how we implement love languages when we do campaigns. So we're going to talk all about that today. As I said in my introduction, your questions are really important, and this is new information for a lot of us. So don't hold back. When you've got a question, put it into the chat or raise your hand, and we will be here to help you. But we're going to start with a little poll. Some of you may have taken us up on the offer to have taken the quiz. There's a free quiz that we sent out for all you in the emails that went out leading up to this. If you felt called to take the quiz and know what your love language is, that's great. If you have some other familiarity, that's also great. But it also isn't required to take this webinar. But if you'd like to, we'd love to know what your love language is. So I'm going to introduce a little poll here and ask you what your love language is. If you could take a minute to answer the question, is it quality time? Is it gifts? Is it acts of service? Is it embodied presence, or is it words of affirmation? This is fascinating. Are you all seeing it live? Come in. That's so cool. No, you're not. Oh, only I have the,
No, you have a privileged position where you're watching our results. Now you're
wow,
getting our love languages before we do.
I do. I wonder how
It
I should.
looks like there's a question, Davy, from Spencer Dalby.
Spencer, do you have a question? Come off mute and ask it.
I was just responding that I did receive the survey and I responded to it.
Oh, good. Great. Thank you. We have a couple more people left. I'll give another minute or so, or another couple of few seconds. And then we'll see what we all said. I'm fascinated.
I think there might be a study here that the love language of those who would spend a couple hours on stewardship on a Saturday, what's
Right.
the love language? We could kind of cross-reference who shows up for a TENS webinar. What's their love language?
Right? It's true. We've just been joined by our third presenter, Amy.
Hello,
So
friends.
welcome, Amy.
Thank you. Thank you. Had a funeral this morning and the family arrived a little late, so a time crunch, but all is well. So glad to be here with everyone.
We're
Well,
glad you're here, Amy. Folks are taking a poll right now, so it's a good time for you to hop on.
all right. I'm going to end our poll. It looks like 24 of 29 folks have answered it.
Phoebe Griswold is waving her hand
Oh,
madly.
Phoebe, I didn't see you. So
Hi,
please.
Phoebe. Oh, you're still muted.
I wish you had an other,
Yeah,
because none of that is what my love language is.
you're right. We need other love languages.
Yeah.
And we can talk about that as we talk about
Okay.
what motivates us, because um, it might not be any of these things, as you've pointed out, Phoebe. So
So I couldn't answer, so I'm sorry.
well, don't be sorry. We're glad that you are here, and we're glad that we're able to talk about this. All right, let me see if I can end this poll and then see if it share results. Look at that. All right, can you all see that now? Look at you. So no one is motivated by gifts, like physically receiving something as affirmation. Um, but lots of you kind of split the two highest, quality time and acts of service. And that's not totally surprising for a whole bunch of great Episcopalians on a Saturday talking about stewardship. But that's really wonderful. We're going to go into each of these, and Amy, our love language expert, is going to teach us about each of these love languages and what it means. But it's really good knowing that a lot of folks value quality time, acts of service, and then our embodied presence got 2 votes, and words of affirmation got 4 votes. That's really great. Well, thank you all for participating in that. I'm going to stop sharing and we're going to move on. Amy, you came just at the right time, because now we're going to move into your section.
That's wonderful. Thank you.
Thank you.
So yes, you may have heard of this kind of way, this lens of viewing the world and our care and relationship for one another called the love languages. And as we saw in the poll, and if you took the survey on your own, they are described as acts of service. Physical touch is often what they talk about, but here in church, we're going to talk about physical presence as much as touch, quality time, words of affirmation, and gifts. And one of the benefits of love languages is often we want to feel loved, and then we also are looking to others to affirm their love for us. And if we know one another's love languages, it really helps us in our communications and relationships and interactions with each other. Because as we saw in this poll, gifts is not a particular love language for any of us, which means, although say I appreciate receiving a gift, it's not something that fills me up with feeling really particularly loved. And I think it can be ironic, because we're doing things that we want to show our care and support, but if it's not landing just right, then we haven't communicated in the ways that we want to. So one of the things I have found, particularly as a parent, is to know what is the love language of my children, and then to speak to them in their languages, or to speak to my husband in his language, so that that desire to help those people in my life feel loved really lands in a way. So let's say your love language is acts of service. That means, anything you might do that helps you show up, helps life be easier for you. Then that would be like unloading the dishwasher or anything. But we actually went through our liturgy to show all of the ways within our parishes these love languages already appear. We talk about loving God, loving our neighbor, and loving ourselves, but how do we actually live into that? And as we look at our liturgy, we find that we are already speaking these 5 love languages, or as Phoebe said, maybe additional love languages that weren't part of the book that came out about this. But in our liturgy, as we brainstormed together, Davy, Dina, and I, some of the acts of service we uncovered were, the altar guild, preparing things, how our faith formation teachers give their time, sometimes during liturgy itself, to guide the youngest members of our congregations, how the choir shows up usually for rehearsal at some point during the week, and then also gives us the gift of music during worship. And, all of the different other people who show up to serve God and to serve us, and we serve one another in acts of service as an act of love. If the next slide, another act of our love language is physical presence or touch. And there are actually many ways that we touch in our liturgies or are physically present. We speak, of course, about just the embodied experience of God that we have with one another. But even in the liturgy and in our moving through worship together, we stand, we sit, we kneel, we move our bodies a lot. I see Davy mentioned coffee hour, or is commenting on coffee hour. Yes, we have coffee hour, we sing, we hold, our worship materials. We receive blessings, we have vestments and linens, all of the things that we see and hear and feel and touch are physical presence, love experiences in liturgy.
We have those 3 dots. Did we want to ask people to share
Yes,
things
I-
about?
Definitely, thank you. And it seems like some folks are already sharing. We have coffee hour, flower guild, holding hands during the Lord's Prayer. Some communities do that.
Yeah, that's
Even
such a beautiful way to have that physical touch, that presence, for congregations that feel comfortable doing that. It's a very intimate thing to watch a congregation hold hands during the Lord's Prayer.
I'm thinking too about somebody who was recently widowed, and the people that came to take communion next to her really got close on either side, almost to pin her in and support her while she was kneeling at the altar rail for communion. I remember being really moved by that as I distributed communion that particular Sunday to this recently widowed woman. Nobody said anything. They just got in real close, and they were really touching her with their shoulders. They were holding her up. It was really beautiful.
That is beautiful. I see that Martha mentioned lay anointing and Gail healing. Our Daughters of the King, one Sunday every month, invites people to our chapel, either during Eucharist or immediately after the service. And they, all hold hands, or and they anoint, and they really do kind of this holy huddle for whoever has shown up to pray. And it's a really beautiful experience of embodied presence and love and care for each other.
Don, I love that you mentioned the making the sign of the cross. I mean, physically touching parts of our own body or our own sense of personal space, or when we do the gospel markation, when we remember that we're thinking and speaking and feeling. Those are really beautiful ways to bring something esoteric into the very practical physical. So really good examples. Oh, and Phoebe. Phoebe wins the day with putting her pledge in the past plate. Absolutely.
Some people really need that moment for offering, and other people are so into the electronic. There's really, I think this is a place where we really have a split on practices in members, preferences maybe.
And I love Connie's mentioning inviting the children up to the altar to help present the elements. We do see that, and it makes me think of, sometimes we are so lucky to have a baptism and all the kids come forward and, we're all involved in a very embodied way as we celebrate this new member in our midst.
Absolutely. Jan, you remind us that, it doesn't have to be your money that can go into a plate. We can use tokens or a card. If you give electronically, put a little card in the plate that says my gift counts or my gift matters. It does matter for some people, that physical putting something in a plate and having it go up to the altar to be gathered, blessed, broken, and shared. That's a really beautiful, important step for us. So thanks. Even if you give electronically, there are ways to bring it into the offertory liturgy. I love it. I love it. You guys are really, really great. And then Jim circles it all back by saying giving away the cash and the plate to a local charity. And that's both the physical and that act of service that we talked about earlier. That's such a beautiful thing when there's a collection taken up in church and then it gets announced where it's going. It can be such a beautiful gift. All right, are we ready to move on to another love language?
Yes, please.
All right.
So I only offered a couple of ideas here because just as we had hoped, folks are really jumping in with wonderful ideas. So the next one we were going to speak about in liturgy is quality time. And, the few things that we have offered up are just gathering at a set time where we all commit to being together and fully present by turning off all of our electronics, by really settling our minds and hearts. And we're curious, what are other ways you see the love language of quality time manifest in our liturgy and our gathering together for worship? Yeah, as Dina mentioned, being with my family or a friend at worship, and to be with God in a more thoughtful and sacred way, for sure.
Connie, I love your comment about starting church committee meetings with a prayer. It's not just business that we're there for. Inviting the Holy Spirit or God into that moment reminds us why we're gathered and brings a quality to that time that we're setting aside. Whenever we set something aside in church, it's the same action as making anything else sacred, setting it aside. And our time is made sacred when we invite God to into it, to call us into that. So thank you for that. It's a beautiful reminder.
Yeah, and I really, I appreciate those congregations, as Martha mentioned, that provide the scripture readings in advance so that people have time to set aside during the week to really sink into those lessons prior to gathering together to hear them together, because that quality time with God that we invite one another into, whether that's on our own or through Bible studies or other book groups, scripture readings, really can really speak of a deep love and care we have for each other and for God and for the Word of God.
Yeah. Our church has a Thursday night group that meets on Zoom and looks at the gospel for the next Sunday. And they sort of theologically reflect on it. The preacher often attends and takes notes, helpful for the sermon. But it's a beautiful way to bring those to come into the service with, or the liturgy with real thought about the lessons that you're reading, having read them before and understood them in a different way. It's a beautiful gift.
Well, and I really like a couple of people mentioned beginning things with prayer, whether it's a meeting or the worship team as they prepare to go out into the nave or the chapel. And this idea of, again, really just centering ourselves and really doing everything we are able to be as fully present to God and to one another. Sometimes we think of the business of church so much that we forget we're not a business. We're a worshiping community. So
For sure. For sure. Gail, I love that you bring in talking about the headlines, important issues in our church, forums on what's going on in the news or community events, whether it's celebration or trauma that brings communities together, setting aside that time and inviting community into our space and having a moment to process with people in a theological way is real quality time. And it's quality for everyone, including the community at large that might participate in something like a vigil or a neighborhood awareness or something like that. Really good point.
Davey and Amy, this is outside of maybe the Sunday liturgy. When we travel together, I love that pilgrimages just made the list as well by Gail. I'm thinking mission trips, summer camp, places where we spend so much time together that we know what we look like with our hair crazy and in our work clothes, and that it gets down to who we really are. There's something really deeply authentic when we travel together and take care of each other, that for me and then when we have those liturgies together as we travel to different places, I think that's really quality time.
I agree. That's making me think of all of the people who will be gathering this summer, and what the gift of quality time. There are so many love languages in that space, and time is such a big one.
For sure. All right, let's move on. We have some more love languages to explore.
So the next one is words of affirmation, which is just, speaking words that say to someone, you are loved, I support you. And for a person for whom that's their language, that can really fill them up. And so in worship, some ideas we had were the hymns that we sing of praise, the great Thanksgiving, of course, itself, the Eucharistic prayer. When we share the peace, often, we greet our neighbors with joy and delight. And there's so many opportunities for sharing that love of words of affirmation when we gather.
Jan, you say the most important ones in church. Thank you, right? When we take time to thank people for their ministries, for what they've done, it's just that practice of gratitude that we give. And it's being thanked feels so good. And it takes so little for us to do it, right? There's such easy words to say. But they really mean something to the people who hear them. So thank you for mentioning that.
Yes, that again, Martha mentioned like just thanks again and again. And I like this idea of the bread and butter thank you notes. I haven't heard that expression, but it is so true that handwritten notes, especially today when everything seems to be email and text and just electronic communications, actually receiving a card with words of affirmation is a powerful thing these days, or support for someone who is grieving or facing illness or other things. Those written words of affirmation, not just spoken, are powerful because we can go back and just refill our well when we need to. So thank you for that.
Martha, do you mean something particular when you say bread and butter? That's not a phrase I've heard in relation to thank you notes. Always ready to learn more about thanking people. That's great. Oh, Phoebe mentions the creed. Yes. There's something in there for all of us, isn't there? Definitely. And it affirms a belief. It's also a point of unity, or sometimes not for some people. It's an interesting moment.
And Martha, I think you may have tried to speak up and I saw you unmuted, but we were not able to hear you. So maybe trying again. We cannot, yeah, for some reason we don't hear you, or at least I don't.
Yeah. Well, we saw your
Leave us
words.
in suspense.
Thank you. Connie mentions that at their annual youth service, high school seniors give a short sermon and acknowledge everyone who's contributed to their growth. What a moment, right? At this really important point in a young person's life as they transition into adulthood, to stop and thank their church community for the gifts that they've been given and the opportunity to grow. That's such a really beautiful tradition in your church. Congratulations for doing it. It's really cool. I love that idea. I really love that. Some of you who have attended my workshops on planned giving will remember that I tell a story about going to a funeral service in the Moravian tradition, where the deceased has a list of all the things for which they are grateful read aloud. It's a part of their funeral liturgy. And they list all of these things that they've learned over time, and they pass them on to people. I've learned this lesson, I'm giving it to you. And they also give gratitude. It's their last word. They give a little piece of their own eulogy in a way by telling people what they're most grateful for. And it fills it, the service that I attended, it was really impactful for the people who were there receiving these thanks from the other side, from the grave. What a beautiful way to do it. So I love that you have this built into some of your traditions. All right. I think we understand words of affirmation in our liturgy. Let's talk about gifts.
Yes.
Our least favorite poll item, but perhaps important anyway.
Which is fascinating, given that often as part of stewardship, gifts are one of the big things that we do, and yet doesn't speak any of the love languages of the folks who took the poll. So gifts are very present. Obviously plate and pledge, the volunteers who offer their time. We talk about time, talent, and treasure. The bread and wine are gifts. Often the artwork and the linens and other things are gifts that people have shared. And I'm seeing some really lovely things in the chat as well. You know, time is such a big gift. And that kind of is that one of those that crosses quality time, acts of service, gifts, love languages are all, you know, we talk about them as individual things, but they are very dynamic and there's a lot of ebb and flow between all of them. Do folks have other ideas for how gifts or gift giving or receiving gifts shows up in our liturgy?
Amy, I'm remembering that at Christmas, St. Andrew's Glenwood in Maryland gave very simple white pottery star ornaments that said St. Andrew's on them, that were handmade by a member of the congregation who's a ceramics artist, very simple as a gift. And some people really didn't like it. They thought it was a gimmick. We found that folks who were worshiping with us at Christmas really enjoyed taking something home with them, especially the children.
That's lovely. we often, I think probably a lot of parishes do this. We gift the altar flowers to folks in our communities who may be ill or have an anniversary or a birthday. And that's always so appreciated. And
Yeah.
that's a fun thing to do. And we also gift, the baptismal candle at a baptism, or we do flowers for our teachers at a teacher appreciation, just little things, but it's so meaningful to have, I think like you mentioned, Dina, something tangible that we carry with us or have in our home or our spaces to remind us of this loving community. Flowers for Mother's Day tomorrow. Yes, I know
Yes.
that's always a good one.
Do we have any godly play teachers, story leaders in this group?
I've been one.
So you'll remember how a parable story begins. When we tell the story of a parable, they're in a gold box because they're a gift to us. And you unwrap this gift and you give it to your students who are there listening, and you unpack this gift together. A parable is a gift we receive from Christ. And I love that idea, and it's yet another gift that when we see these teachings as gift rather than things we have to do, it turns our understanding of what Jesus' ministry was and his words, what he was trying to offer us.
Yes.
Oh, Martha, yes. Palm crosses. I love that. I look around my room right now and I see two of them because I forgot to take last year's in. So it's such a great reminder all year round that we have this tangible thing.
And also, I appreciate, Martha, that you mentioned that, during the pandemic, you mailed them out. I think a lot of us got into the practice then when we were not physically present, when we could not share our love or express our love by being physically present, that we did it with gifts that we mailed out to our communities or handed out. I know some communities even did drive-by communion and things like that after online liturgy together, worship together.
For sure.
Oh, and Dina, you talk about your childhood Sunday school pen with the attached pieces for each year. Oh, yeah, but like a Royal School of Church music ribbons and medallions. And I know some churches do that with like their youth acolytes. They get a cross and the year is engraved on the back every year that they serve, and then they're given that cross at graduation. There are just some beautiful traditions of gifts, again, to carry a bit of that experience with us as we move through the rest of our world.
Mm-hmm. And gifts can be very small and still be meaningful. I've been working in fundraising for 30 years, and like Dina mentioned in her example, some donors don't want to be given gifts. They think, I don't need to be recognized. You're taking money away from the thing I'm supporting by giving me something back. I didn't do it for that. Well, some people really appreciate having it. It just speaks to how we have and receive love, these languages that we're being taught. Some people say no thanks to gifts. I love that. Well, this is great. I want to acknowledge that at least one person didn't answer the poll because there are other ways that they receive love and languages of love. And I wonder, besides these five, if there are others that we would include in our list of love languages. Just come off, raise your hand and come off mute or type it into the chat. We'd love to hear from you if you have yet other languages that we haven't learned. I love my Anglican rosary, not only because it's faster to get through, than a Catholic one, but because it's so meaningful. And we can make them in our churches. We made them in our church one year and then taught people about the rosary. It was interesting.
So Davy, I'm noticing that Phoebe also unmuted, but I don't think we could.
Yeah,
hear
Phoebe's here.
Yeah, but she was speaking and we can't hear her.
Oh,
I didn't speak yet.
Oh, you didn't. Okay, thank
but
you.
now,
And was your question other ways of love that we didn't see in the list when I said others? That was your question?
exactly. If you
Oh,
want to tell us what your other is.
good. Good, because for me, the primary gift of love is praying. That's prayer. That's love because I'm talking to God and God's talking to me. So I just couldn't answer. These others just seemed right. Yeah, but they seemed like out of the secular world. And love is my primary language. Prayer is my primary language of love to love. So, that's why I got all excited. So thank you.
Phoebe, I love it when you're excited, and thank you for that. It's great, and cut right to the chase. Prayer is love, and it's direct communication.
Yeah,
I
that's,
love it.
that's the heart of who we are. This other's great, but anyway, thank you for giving
Thank
me.
you.
Thank you.
And thank you all for walking through this with us. This was a really beautiful exercise. And thank you, Amy, for introducing us to love languages.
Sure. Thank you everyone for participating. Really awesome to hear your ideas and thoughts.
Well, let's move into some of these gifts that we get in parables and talk about the love languages that are present in the teachings of Jesus. And Dina, I'm wondering if you might want to walk us through these.
Absolutely. And friends, we're going to do this fairly quickly so that we can devote some time to translating this into the acts of service in the love language you speak as stewardship leaders. This is really to stir our hearts to the variety of ways that Jesus lived into a loving presence in the world and received love from others. So let's use the chat box, and whenever you're ready to pop it in there, I'm going to read this text. And when you hear one of our 5 or 6 love languages, I love Phoebe's answer of prayer, because I think it might be all of them, Phoebe. I think prayer might be all of the love languages pulled together, because I couldn't. Yeah, anyway, we can play with that later. But let me read this aloud. And I'll ask for a volunteer for the next text if somebody wants to be thinking about that act of service they might lovingly offer. I'll read this first one. And when you hear something of act of service, physical presence or touch, quality time, words of affirmation or gifts between Jesus and others, please pop it into the chat box. That would be great. So this text comes to us from Matthew chapter 9. Then suddenly a woman who had been suffering from hemorrhages for 12 years came up behind him and touched the fringe of his cloak. For she said to herself, "If I only touch his cloak, I will be made well." Jesus turned, and seeing her, he said, "Take heart, daughter, your faith has made you well." And instantly the woman was made well. What do you hear, friends? Pop it into the chat box if you hear any love language or notice any love language being spoken or heard. Thank you. Gail is offering physical touch. She does. She reaches out for the fringe of Jesus's cloak. It says the word touch in it, so that's pretty right there. Physical presence, acts of service, yes. Presence, affirmation, sure. We might hear affirmation, the words of affirmation, and being called daughter, that kind of inclusion as a family, being brought in intimately. touch and quality time. Yeah, she had this moment with Jesus, just her and Jesus. I mean, what beautiful quality time they shared together. Yes, Jesus turned to her and paid attention. Davy offers that as quality time. Gift of healing, gift of recognition and noticing her as a daughter, the daughter affirmation. Take heart, daughter, your faith has made you well. Those are wonderful words of affirmation. Reach out to God in daily thoughts. Yes, how we might apply that, Spencer, in reaching out to touch, metaphorically, the hem, the fringe of Jesus's cloak in our own daily prayer and meditation and thoughts, healing and being recognized. All right. Thank you for those. So now you're going to be reading the Gospels and getting to know Jesus and love languages. Let's do it again with Mark 14. Do I have a volunteer to come off mute and read this text?
While he was at Bethany in the house of Simon the leper, as he sat at the table, a woman came with an alabaster jar of very costly ointment of nard, and she broke open the jar and poured the ointment on his head. But some were there who said to one another in anger, "Why was the ointment wasted in this way? For this ointment could have been sold for more than 300 denarii, and the money given to the poor." And they scolded her. But Jesus said, "Let her alone. Why do you trouble her? She has performed a good service for me, for you always have the poor with you, and you can show kindness to them whenever you wish, but you will not always have me. She has done what she could. She has anointed my body beforehand for its burial. Truly, I tell you, wherever the good news is proclaimed in the whole world, what she has done will be told in remembrance of her."
Thank you, Gail, for reading that text from Mark 14. What love languages are being spoken? We could almost say aren't being spoken in this text. There's a lot here. What jumps out at you first? Pop one in there. This is one of my favorite texts in the Gospels. Thank you, Gail, for reading it so beautifully. That itself is a gift when we can listen and really perceive what's happening. So giving of a gift, absolutely. The physicality of the ointment, for those of us that have studied this story, we know how valuable and how precious and rare that ointment is. So the giving of a gift, the words of affirmation. Yeah, Jesus defended her in a way that's when we stand up for somebody or advocate in a way that is definitely affirming their worth and affirming their position in the community. Anointing him, an act of service to anoint and physical touch. Give the gift of costly ointment, affirmation by Jesus, physical touch in the act of anointing. So this is one of those stories where Jesus is speaking love, touching with love, giving love. Jesus's words were also an act of service in support of her. Yes, Amy, he's using his status to support her status when others are trying to tear it down and deny it or question her actions. Wonderful. You're getting the hang of this, friends. We're speaking the love languages and hearing them. Davy, I think we have at least one more. And I think this one is coming up in the fall. No, not yet.
No, but we can go to that if you feel like we're.
I think we're ready to go to that one. What we wanted to do here was for anyone who is preaching on October 20th, 2024, we have a love language gift for you. We're going to talk about the love languages in this text, and that might even give you some notes or a head start about communicating in a variety of love languages with your people in your setting in October during stewardship season. So for some of you who are planning to preach or preach every Sunday, you can just put these notes somewhere that you can find them, maybe on your phone for October 14th, when you wake up Monday morning and start thinking about your sermon. So I'll read this one, and we'll get into this one a little more deeply so that we really help our sermon prep friends. This is a text from Mark chapter 10. James and John, the sons of Zebedee, came forward to Jesus and said to him, "Teacher, we want you to do for us whatever we ask of you." And he said to them, "What is it you want me to do for you?" And they said to him, "Grant us to sit, one at your right hand and one at your left, in your glory." But Jesus said to them, "You do not know what you are asking. Are you able to drink the cup that I drink, or be baptized with the baptism that I am baptized with?" They replied, "We are able." Then Jesus said to them, "The cup that I drink, you will drink. And with the baptism with which I am baptized, you will be baptized. But to sit at my right hand or at my left is not mine to grant, but it is for those for whom it has been prepared." When the 10 heard this, they began to be angry with James and John. So Jesus called them and said to them, "You know that among the Gentiles, those whom they recognize as their rulers lord it over them, and their great ones are tyrants over them. But it is not so among you. But whoever wishes to become great among you must be your servant, and whoever wishes to be first among you must be slave of all. For the Son of Man came not to be served, but to serve, and to give his life a ransom for many. Friends, how might you understand some of the language of love spoken or heard here? It's a tougher one for sure, so I'll get us started because I've had a little more time to think about it. I think James and John, they're speaking a love language of honor. They want to be honored, recognized, or words of affirmation. They want to be affirmed positionally in a place of honor or power. That would help them to feel loved and honored if they knew their position when Jesus came into his glory, whatever they thought that was going to look like, which we know is probably not unfolding as they had hoped or thought at the time. So I think they're asking for Jesus to love them in a particular way. Will you love me in the way of the world and give me a place of honor? Right? And Jesus is going to love them differently or invite them to love differently. How does Jesus invite them to love? Yes, quality time. So that is in there, I suppose. Amy, if I get to sit at your right hand, Amy, then that means I get to have quality time with you. That's a good point, because you're on your throne and I'm sitting on the little seat next to your throne, and we spend a lot of time together that way. That would be a quality time moment. That's great. And so then let me catch this here. So grant us to sit one at your left and one at your right, physical presence. We want to be near you. Thank you, Gail. Yes, they want to be close in physical proximity to Jesus. Maybe not only for their own honor, but to help Jesus do what they believe he's going to do, to be available for acts of service, to be right there where they can serve Jesus in his glory. Quality time requests from James and John. Yes, Jesus came to serve, to give his life as a ransom for many. Ooh, the word ransom, to understand that as if we would change the word in that text to gift, to give his life as a gift for many, a ransom for many. A ransom is a particular kind of a gift, isn't it? It's a demanded gift. It's a gift with a lot of strings that's going to free somebody. Gifts, baptism and the cup, although it's maybe unfolding in unexpected ways for them. So, right, is this cup, is this physical act of baptism something you want? Is this the gift you want? Yes, and Jesus is teaching. Thank you, Christine. Jesus is teaching to them about what they cannot possibly understand yet is an act of love. And better to give than to receive. Our joy is in the act of giving, right? Rather than sitting on the right hand and the left. Quality time, even if it does turn the world upside down. Thank you, Martha, for that. So you're going to get the quality time with Jesus, James and John, but it's not going to be like you thought it was going to be. And words of affirmation. Jesus doesn't rebuke James and John for their arrogance, but uses it to teach them. That is, he affirms that they want to serve him. Yeah, that's right. That's right. Hoyt, Kennedy, acts of service involve serving others, not a favored seat at the table, right? We might think of that as front of house or back of house in a restaurant. We thank the server all the time, but the people in the kitchen, there's a lot of them working hard to make that plate ready to feed you. Not a favored seat at the table necessarily. Gail adds, Jesus's gift to them is to remind them that gaining a place of honor comes with a reciprocal responsibility of servanthood. Right. It's that gift is there's a different cost to it. That's right.
Well, and I really appreciate that comment, Gail, because it is the reminder that when we're talking about love, that's relational, right? All of this is about relationship, and there is reciprocity. So there's the giving and the receiving, and then the responsibility of what comes with that relationship in terms of care and commitment and dignity and all the pieces of that. So thank you for that.
I'm hearing something new in this text I haven't heard before, which is always fun. That's why we study scripture. It is the living word. And I'm hearing that James and John are really seeking some security. And instead, they're being handed an opportunity to really serve as Jesus serves. But I'm really sensing they want some security for their future. They want to know where they're going to be. And at some levels, we turn the corner into making our stewardship campaigns relevant to people. We all understand that in James and John, how much we long for some security for the future, for the congregation, for our families, for our own identities and life. Yeah. Thank you, everyone, for the opportunity to study scripture with you.
Yeah, this is
I'm
great.
by that. That's a gift.
And I'm glad that we looked at this particular gospel that comes right as many of our congregations are in the middle of their campaigns for the fall. To be able to preach a sermon, to use this text to preach a sermon on gift, it will be really helpful, I hope. Because it is our stewardship time when we're focusing on gifts. To have brought the gift out of this where maybe it wasn't so obvious was a really beautiful gift, Dina. So thank you.
I'm delighted, Davy, and I'm moved by the variety of ways we see love around us and love in the Jesus story, especially.
For sure. Well, let's talk a little bit about our campaigns, since we've now whet our appetite about our campaign season. I want to go over some of the things that motivate us using the metaphor of our love languages. And so, we really talk about recognition. When we want to share our gifts, we know that it feels good. There's certainly teaching about there. It's a joyful giver, and it's better to give than receive. When we see our gifts changing the neighborhood or our neighbors or our lives or our community, that's one of our motivations. When we're asked, simply being asked to participate is being drawn in to a community, and that's very important for us. Some of us are motivated by duty, and some of us want to be a change agent in the world. So let's dig a little deeper into each of these and talk about how we like to be, how we see love languages. And one of them is in recognition. While as a group, we rejected gifts as one of our favorite love languages, recognition is still important. And thank you, gratitude is the way that we so often engage the ministry of recognition in our church. So some of these we've already talked about. You all are already on it, writing handwritten notes, making a Thanksgiving to everyone who's participated, throwing a little lovely post-campaign luncheon to thank everyone. Maybe make a little gift. Dina talked about the stars as the Christmas ornament. What other sorts of small gifts can you give that make people feel I participated and I liked this? A gift of quality time in our way to recognize. Take someone out to lunch or coffee. I always do this when I run a campaign with the person who made the largest gift and the person who made the smallest gift. And I don't tell them that they made the largest or the smallest gift. I just call them and I want to know what they value about church, what they cared about, why were they motivated to give. And I use those two extremes just because I can't take everyone out for coffee, but to sort of start to build a story of how people engage and how they want to be recognized. Those moments of quality time that they share with me are really important to me, and I learn so much from them. So I pass that along for folks who might want to do something like that. And finally, it might seem like the least favorite option to talk about reporting on a ministry or reading that report at the annual meeting or taking a moment but that's acknowledgement as well. And we need to remember that we need to talk about what our ministries do and who's involved with them and report on the impact. That's one way that we recognize the people who have made it possible. Giving just feels good. So this is another one of our love languages. Giving gifts, receiving gifts. We do it because it feels good to give. We get this reaffirmation when we do it. When we engage, we feel like we're participating. It's nice to see people happy, right? When we give a gift, we want to be able to see that joy that someone has, or our own joy at making the gift. I love Christmas morning, not because of opening things, but because I get to see people open the things that I've picked out for them. And that is such a beautiful way that we work in our campaigns as well. When we make our gift to the church, it should be a really beautiful affirmation, a joy. It's because we're participating with God in that moment of co-creating, of making church possible, growing God's kingdom, doing the work that we're called to do. Our gifts are one of the ways that we make that possible. It's also community, right? So my gift isn't in isolation. It joins with everybody else's gift. And my gift might be insignificant, but when it's compounded with everybody else's gift, it runs a church, it creates ministry, it feeds the hungry, it serves the poor. Then that makes my gift pretty darn important. And so I love being able to have that camaraderie, that joining with others. Impact for me, and perhaps for those of you who listed acts of service as their number one thing, is really what motivates me to give. I want to know that my gift is actually being used to do things in ministry in my community. How it impacts our neighborhoods or our neighbors, our communities. And I want to see that, and I want that reported back to me. So we want to, in our churches, not only talk about our ministries, but give those reports back to our members and say, you know, our food program fed this many people and we did this with our gifts. How do you feel about that? That's real impact. There are families now that are not food insecure because we've been able to offer this ministry. That starts to feel impactful, and that's a really good motivator for many people. And hearing stories. I say this all the time, stewardship is storytelling. We want to engage people in their journey of stewardship and tell those stories back to us. Because just as when we uncovered the Gospels, we heard new things. When we hear each other's stories, we uncover new things about our church that we love or we didn't know we loved, but we hear it through somebody else's words. So share those stories because they motivate us to give. Invitation is perhaps one of the hardest skills that we need to develop in our communities. We're very welcoming as Episcopalians. If you ask us, we say the coffee is ready and hospitality is there, and the ushers will show you a seat and everybody will smile. But before welcome, we need to invite. And invitation is active, where welcome is, it's active in its own way, but it's passive. It's what happens once people get there. We need to invite people to make their gift. So it's really important that, and I'm preaching to the choir here, but when we do our stewardship campaigns, we need to make certain that we reach everyone, that everybody has an opportunity to give. We often think that we make a few announcements, we send out a letter, we've covered all of our bases, but what about that person who wasn't in church that Sunday or whose address you don't have? How do we reach everybody and make certain that everybody has an opportunity? Because when we are invited to make a gift to support ministry, we're invited into, like James and John, that closer relationship in the church. We're seated right there where we can have that beautiful relationship with each other and shoulder to shoulder walk to the communion rail, participating as people in community in our church. So invite people to share their ideas. When there's a problem to solve, invite people into it. Vestries often close the doors when things get rough and they try to solve the problem without panicking people. And I'm not encouraging panic, but I am encouraging that we open the door sometimes and solicit more ideas than the 9 or 12 of us sitting around a table. We might need other people and other ideas. That's invitation to say, we've got something going on here. How can you help us out? I've identified these gifts in you. Would you like to serve on this committee? Seems like a thankless invitation, but really it could unlock something in them that you didn't know they had or they didn't know they had. And just being invited into that place of leadership for a church will really deepen somebody's relationship with you. We love to be asked for advice or to share our wisdom. When I engage somebody for a fundraising solicitation, often my first conversation is, I'd like your advice on this idea that we have, this ministry that we're doing. Here's what our goal is. How would you accomplish it? And when they start talking about it, then they start buying into it. They start getting excited about it. Then the ask becomes really easy. Well, will you give some time or some talent or some treasure to this? The answer then becomes very easy for them to say yes. So we love to be asked for advice. Find the way to ask for your members to help you with things. Teach a class. When you have a special skill or you've gone away on a pilgrimage and want to bring that skill back to your congregation, offer those gifts because they are really beautiful. When somebody's gone away, invite them back in to say, what did you learn when you were away on your pilgrimage or when you took that class? What might we learn from you? Martha reminds us that we can use photos. They tell stories far better than words. And so include photos in your website, in your materials, and then help people, it helps draw that connection with the ministry and the people who are being served by that ministry. So when it's appropriate, share those stories and those pictures. Make sure you get permission before you take a picture. But it's a really good skill and a really great way to communicate. People often give out of a sense of duty. I want the church to be here for my grandchildren. It was here for me. That's not a bad reason to give. It's an important thing. It unlocks in us that like our people who want to sit on the right and left of Jesus, it unlocks in that place of security. We want our church to be here. We want people to be acknowledged. So a sense of duty isn't a bad reason for people to want to give. It's a language that we can use, and it touches on all of the aspects of our love languages, I think. Your gift makes a difference. Can we count on you to support? No matter what the size is, your gift will matter to our campaign. But I think finally, the other reason that that we use these love languages and that we find ways into our motivation is that we want to help people be the change in the world that they want to see. I think that this is such an important teaching that we need to be active in changing. We can't just wish it. And as Phoebe reminds us, prayer is one of the active ways that we engage the ministry of changing the world. We pray for change. We use that to then motivate our actions, and we use our gifts of time, talent, and treasure to make those happen. So be that change. Take the Great Commission very seriously. You are being called to go out and share the good news. And your gifts of wealth, works, and wisdom will make your community stronger, your neighborhood safer, your communities more well bonded and bound to each other. And that could just bring more of everything to your community. So find the ways in that your people, your members are motivated, and use these when you're developing your conversation, your campaign, your stewardship letters. Try to find the ways in that appeal to people's love languages and their reasons to be motivated. I'm going to hand it back over to Dina, who's going to wrap it all up in a nice bow for us.
I will try. That will be my gift if I can do it, friends. This has really energized me around the variety of ways that we get to interact with God's people around generosity. So as we think about our campaign, Davey has given a lot of examples for this, and I really love Martha's sharing in the chat box, because I'm thinking that when folks can't be present for some of those moments, like the refugees coming into the airport or the presenting of items that people have sewn, to capture a photograph is actually allowing people to have a sense of touch or presence with the world beyond. And, we know for a lot of reasons we don't want the whole church to show up as we present certain things. It's got to be more intimate. But even showing the hands and the items without faces can have an impact and help people to feel really present to the ways we are loving the world, loving one another. So part of why we are doing this, and this is a fun thing to end on, is when Amy joined the board, one of the things Amy, who's a friend of mine from another colleague group, Amy said, I think that might be your love language to me one day. And I didn't really know what that meant, but it allowed me to know myself better, to examine that, and to think more about how I express love to people close to me, to my children, to my husband, to two refugee teenagers who live with us now. They have different ways that they need my love, as Amy has said with her children and husband. And so that's really helped me to not be cranky when they don't respond to my love language when I'm speaking mine and not necessarily speaking theirs. And we do that a little bit in the church. We ask people to consider stewardship in the way that perhaps speaks to us, without stepping back and acknowledging all the variety in the love languages. And that's what today is really for. So I hope we take away from this a new sensibility about how important it is to give time to embodied physical acts of service tied to the campaign, whether that's inviting people to walk their gifts forward and place them in a large basket at the altar rather than to stay seated. to bring in something with their pledge card, like fresh socks for the shelter or old towels for the guide dog shelter training program, something that will get people moving physically together that embodies them and embodies that love that they may speak. Also, creating connection through service opportunities. We know that people who volunteer in the church are more likely to contribute as well financially. They're invested with their time and with their hearts. And so some of you might do some community organizing, like one-on-ones, or have cottage meetings or house meetings around stewardship themes or outreach activities and the vision of the congregation. That creates a lot of connection and quality time. Those of us who are preaching, it's important that we preach using affirming language. You are a generous community, and give examples. You are walking in love. That's the theme this year, walk in love. You are walking in love in these beautiful ways. Oftentimes, I grew up in a congregation that was more likely to point out the things I was doing wrong rather than the things that I was growing into faithfully. And so I'm very keen on using appreciative and affirming language, not only from the pulpit, also in our letters and in our testimonies and the messaging that we give out around money and giving and generosity. So the congregation I served before taking this diocesan position, in my early years there, we gave everyone a bright red grocery store reusable bag because that was kind of a thing 15 years ago. You could get those printed pretty cheaply. It was fairly new. And I love that I still see those around. That's like 14 years ago or 15 years ago. And sometimes I still see those in the grocery store. We gave them out like crazy to people. And all of the pledge materials were given out in the bag, which had a lovely design on it and the church prominently named so that when you take it to the grocery store, other people see you and with that. So you might think of something like that. Canvas tote bags right now with my 18-year-old daughter and her friends are all the rage. Young people carry canvas tote bags instead of purses or book bags a lot of the time. So those tote bags are very popular. Perhaps you give out flowers, baby pumpkins in the fall, mugs, all these things. There's also Walk in Love themed logo materials on the TENS website. So if you just wanted to get a couple of gifts to thank your stewardship team, you might get them a really nice water bottle or mug from the TENS little store, the little merch shop on the TENS website that has the Walk in Love theme, or give that out as a prize to some of your donors. So we are on our last slide, or was that our last slide? Hearing all the love languages. Oh, we're on the first slide. It's all right. Now, this is a review, friends, of all the things we learned as we go. Here we go. So when people are giving a gift on a pledge card, the physicality of a pledge card works really well for a lot of us. We're used to it. People will also give through their time and volunteering, and we want to acknowledge that as the gift it is as well. My one suggestion as you are hearing all the love languages and speaking to all the love languages is that you do invite people to bring in something very tangible along with their pledge card or in a related campaign. That allows children to really understand in a very real way, we are collecting a thing for people who need this thing. And that's very parallel to the pledge card, which may not speak as well to younger children who may not be able to understand that as well. So it's a teaching moment if we can gather something, food for the pantry, for example. So with all that, friends, what insights, ideas, new wisdom, existing wisdom do you have? How might you reach people in a new way this season? We've got time to plan. It's early, stewardship teams, good job. You've got time to really think about this, but what's coming across your heart and mind right now? What might we do to expand how we motivate giving and generosity? How might you already be doing things and align it with a language of love that motivates you and others around you? Share those ideas. Come off come off mute or pop them in the chat, either way.
I'm going to stop sharing our screens so we can see each other again
Excellent.
and share some of those ideas.
Feel free to unmute. Spencer, did you have one to share? Perhaps it was someone else.
Davy, Dina,
Yes.
this is Jan Hosea in Albuquerque, New Mexico. And one of the things we developed, I don't know, 8 or 10 years ago, was a children's stewardship campaign that had a pledge card that included not just money, but a commitment to bring somebody to Sunday school with them, a commitment to read scripture regularly, but they could choose from a whole list of things, as well as making a financial contribution. But it helped them to get a grand idea of stewardship in general and then take it to the specific for themselves. And it was really successful. They loved it. Thanks.
Oh, it's beautiful, Jan. Thank you. I'm wondering if you have copies of that. I know we'd love to see it at TENS because this is something that folks ask about. It would be really nice to see what you used for that, how you designed it.
Sure, I'll send it to you, Davy.
Thanks, Jan.
Thank you so much. That's wonderful, Jan. Other thoughts, ideas that you want to offer so that we can learn new things together as we prepare for the campaign?
Hi.
Hi, Linda and Maria.
Yes,
Maria.
yes, I'm
Hi,
Maria
Maria.
from St. Catherine's in Marietta. One of the things that we used last year, and we're trying to think about how we will use it this year, is that we had a very strong visual in our narthex in our church. We actually built a tree, and as folks pledged, they got to hang a green leaf on the tree for their funds and a yellow leaf for their ministry. And that was very exciting to everyone because each week they could see how the tree was growing. It was a little difficult to implement because, you know, typically we do our pledges at in-gathering, but it really happens throughout the pledging season. So everyone talks about the tree and how it looked and how realistic it was. And we had the banner of rooted in abundance on it. And we had our church values as a base of the tree. So if you can do a visual, we found that was fantastic. So
Really
Mhm.
helped.
yeah.
Well, Linda and Maria, thank you for that. We'd love to see a picture of your tree.
Yeah.
Can you send that to Davy? Especially
Yeah.
with the values that you're rooted in these values. I mean, I could just imagine it.
That's so
And
cool.
then the physical touch of being able to get close to it, seeing your
Right.
name is a word of affirmation for those who need the affirmation, the belonging. I think that is a really beautiful idea. Thank you so
Love
much.
it.
Absolutely.
And you're at St. Catherine's Marietta, so Sarah Fisher, Mother Sarah.
Yes.
Your
She's our fearless leader who is on sabbatical at the moment.
former TENS board member, by the way. So,
Lucky you.
so
Love it.
thank you. I love it. And those, you know, when you can hang your campaign off of a central image, you physically hung something off of your campaign, but it's really great a way to do that. So I really appreciate it. Gail, before I ask you to come off mute, I wanted to address Martha's question in the chat about advice on stewardship during transition. And this is something that Jim Woolridge from Advent Sun City West knows about because we did a training with his church when Father Timothy retired, specifically about stewardship in a time of transition. So I have some materials I'm happy to send you. What's really important to know is that you do stewardship during a time of transition so that you set the next rector up for success
Mhm.
and that you have a really strong program. So I'll send you some more information on that. And I love that you do your pledge campaign during Easter. What a beautiful way to do it. You'll note that TENS has finally learned that we should offer lessons that aren't tied to specific gospels. So now our reflections are timeless. You can use them with any gospel text any time of the year. So it took us a while to learn that lesson, but we did. Thanks, Martha, for your question. Gail, I see you've got your hand up. Would you like to come off mute?
Yeah, we are sort of taking a leap of faith this year. And we've decided to have our own logo. And this is the first time we're doing it. I have no idea how it's going to work. But it was great even just coming up with what the sort of phrase will be. We just did that a week ago, and it's going to be belong, be loved, be generous.
I love that.
I don't know how
Lovely. And what's your visual with that?
Well, we're just that's our challenge on Monday, to come up with our visual.
Okay.
So, this was the first thing was since this was what they wanted to do, I said, okay, well, let's see if we can come up with something first. And then, and we have a lot of great graphic people. So we did a really good narrative budget last year. So we're going to build on that. We had some really good results from our house meetings, which we've decided this year we would switch around a little bit, that instead of just having the people who normally come to house meetings, we'll have them instead come to dinners at church and save the house meetings for the new people who have just come on board. So we shall see how that works. This is all new territory.
What I love about all of that, Gail, is that, it's great to shake it up every once in a while and do something new. If you run the same campaign year after year, you're going to get the same results year after year. And we want things to change in church. So I appreciate that you're trying something new, and you'll learn from that what works and what you can improve on. So congrats.
I like the tree idea. Last year, what we did was we were trying to get an image for the church, which is actually a physical picture of the church itself. And we used that going right up to the steeple for a fundraiser, which was fun because people loved the coloring in every week of how far we were and how close we were to the steeple. And 1 week I remembered it was missing, and everybody was, oh, where is the visual? So it meant it shows that the visual does matter. So I like the idea of the tree. Maybe that will work this year.
Maybe. Great news, Gail. Thank you for that. Spencer, I see you've got your hand up. Would you like to come off mute?
Yes, thank you. I have two questions. One is, if some of us can think of a question, after the meeting has closed, would any or all of you share your email addresses so that we can reach out to you with our question?
Yeah.
Certainly, I'll put it in the email that you're all going to get later with the materials. I'll let you know how you can reach out to us.
Great, thank you. My second question is, our parish, Church of Good Shepherd, we're in the Boston area. We are also in transition, and our stewardship last fall got off to a late start, and everything was crunched into like November, December. So this year, we've kind of reformed a committee, and we want to start much earlier. And what we were thinking, we'll call it like a drip campaign. Instead of bombarding the parish with everything all at once, kind of just, get them thinking about it and start talking about it this summer leading up to our fall campaign. Does TENS have any kind of pamphlets available that we could hand out in church talking about stewardship, that we can get them thinking about it? Or is there a video that we could put in our bulletin, a video link that they could click on, that again would give them a little presentation about stewardship, just to kind of get them thinking about it?
I love that. So about a brochure or a flyer, what TENS does is we provide seasonal reflections because we agree that if you reserve all of the talk of stewardship until the fall, it comes on as a surprise, and we don't want to do that. So throughout the year, it's nice to have little messages. So we release every church season. You can get them Advent through Pentecost. And then we do 2 in Pentecost because it's such a long season. We do a Pentecost, you can do anytime right around the feast, and then sort of a late Pentecost reflection in that sort of August time. And so you've got 2 left that you can use, the one for Pentecost and late Pentecost, that take the church season and they talk about our gifts and our stewardship. So those are 2 things you can find on our website, and I'll make sure that you get the link for that, Spencer. You can download it, and they're just 300-word reflections. And then they ask some questions. So you can use them like in a small group, or you can just put them in the bulletin and have people take them home and read and reflect on. I love the idea of kind of dripping or planting the seeds all year round so that you get this. As far as a video about like a general intro to stewardship, boy, you'd think we'd have something like that. And it sounds like something for us to develop. We don't have a basic, here's what stewardship is.
Okay, it's so far so good. Well, first couple of days are a little bit bumpy.
Certainly we can talk about what that would look like with you. And now you've given us something that we should develop.
Because I had stitches here, few here, and few here. Okay.
Okay, thank you, Davey. I did see the seasonal link, so we're able to just screen print those and then just make copies and hand them out at church?
Yeah, there's a PDF if you and you can download the PDF. And then I think we give them to you in Word and in PDF, and you can use them, print them off, and I hope it helps generate some conversation for y'all.
Another
Okay,
another
thank you.
thought for Spencer, another thought that I think might, depending on your congregation, you might do kind of a Q&A with 2 people just in your congregation and video that and share it. Something very simple with faces they might recognize. It does not need to be the rector or the treasurer. Rather, you know, what is stewardship? And have somebody read an answer and share just a 3-minute, very quick. You could do a couple of, there's a lot of Q&A material out there about stewardship. What is a tithe? Why do we give? There's a lot of Q&A.
Okay, that's a good idea. Thank you.
Great. All right, friends. Well, we are at our time, but your questions have been so amazing and really helpful to us. I really thank you. And I thank my co-leaders, Amy and Dina, for the gifts that they bring to TENS, and particularly to this webinar. You couldn't imagine a more wonderful group of people to work with than the TENS board, and these 2 are stars. So thank you so much for what you do for all of us. Really beautiful conversations today and learning. I will get all of this out to you this weekend, probably by Monday at the latest. You'll have an email from me with the recording, with the slides. I know there was a question to see a slide. Sorry, I didn't get back to it, but you'll get the whole slide presentation. And some other fun things, including how to stay in contact with Dina and Amy and me, should you have other questions. Martha, I'll get that stewardship in a time of transition slide deck to you as well. Super helpful, I hope. Thank you all. I release you to your Saturdays. I hope that you have a beautiful day, and we'll see you on an upcoming webinar. Goodbye, friends.
Goodbye, everyone. Davey, thank you so much for leading us.
Thank you, Davey.
Thank you, Davey.
everyone.
Thanks.
Blessings, everyone. Bye-bye.
Blessings
Bye.
on your day too.